Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 6 stories ranging from tales of creepy emails, a creepy daycare center, and so much more. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps out so much with the algorithm. Let's see if we can reach, let's do 1100 likes on this one. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. When my brother and I were kids, we didn't get to create fond memories with our grandparents like most children do. My maternal grandparents died shortly after we were born, and my paternal grandparents were strange. The only communication we had with them was through letters sent at Christmas. Every so often we would get a letter addressed from the rest of the family that just contained random scribbles and hellos. Apart from my grandparents and the ominous letters, I never had contact with my father's side. I never even met any of them in person. I still remember the day we were dropped off in front of my grandparents' house. Not because it was the first time we were to meet them, but because of the reason, and because of the horrors that unfolded that day. My grandparents lived in an incredibly old century house that was one painted white but had begun fading and peeling long ago. The house was wrapped in a dead garden and terrible dark vines, looking as if they were going to pull the house down. But the strangest thing of all was the boarded second-story windows. My mother and father had just got divorced. It happened suddenly, when it dawned on my father that she was having an affair. He didn't have time to find a living space so quickly, so he arranged to stay at a friend's place and dropped us off at my grandparents' for the meantime. My father was a sweet man. He would do anything for us, which made it all the sadder when he had no choice to leave us in what to us was a stranger's house. We had just pulled in the driveway when my dad killed the engine. He looked back at us in the back seats with a grim expression on his face. "I need you both to behave while you're here. Remember, it will only be a week, I promise." He choked on the last word as his eyes glistened with tears and shame. I never blamed him for what happened, but I guess that never really mattered. I looked over at my brother. He was only a year younger, but I felt protective over him like he was still a baby. He was drawing a picture while my father spoke. It looked to be a hero swooping in and saving us all. "Boys, look here for a minute." His loud, masculine voice demanded our attention. We both stared at our father in silence. "While you're here, you need to follow one very simple rule, okay?" We both nodded. "You need to stay on the main floor, okay? Don't go up the stairs for any reason, alright?" I nodded, even though it sounded silly. I wondered what could be wrong with going upstairs. Usually, upstairs was where bedrooms were. Then I began wondering where we'd sleep. If only that was where my troubles ended. Tim seemed unfazed and just started coloring again. My father noticed and snatched his book out of his hands. I began to feel nervous as my father's actions were becoming uncharacteristically erratic. "Tim, this is important. Are you listening to me?" My father instantly regretted his outburst as tears welled up in Tim's eyes. He looked to my father and spoke. "I'll be strong, Dad." I had no idea where that came from, but I'll never forget it. It was the only time I saw my dad cry. "I know you will, buddy. Dennis, look after our little hero here, okay?" "Yes, sir," was all I could muster because I couldn't tell what was wrong with my father. Was he sad? Mad? Did Tim do something? But I figured it was probably because Mom was gone. I hopped out of the Cadillac and my dad brought our few bags to the door and knocked. He looked pale in that summer sun. A moment went by, and he knocked again. The door jangled and a gruff voice could be heard on the other side. Keep your fucking shorts on, I'm coming. Tim and I snickered, as my father rolled his eyes. I could hear 1,000 locks being unlocked and the door finally flung ajar. The gruff voice suited the old man that stepped out. He wore a dirty white shirt and black suspenders. He had short white hair that blended perfectly into his white stubble. "Oh my lord, are these my boys? Look how you've grown." Our grandfather ruffled our hair as I wondered if he had ever seen us before. He ushered us into the home. It smelt like old cigarettes and most of the furniture was caked in dust. We were told to drop our bags in the room at the end of the hall. As we did, I could hear my father arguing with my grandfather. The room was small, with a double bed and a small desk. I guess Tim and I would be sharing. My father appeared in the door and held out with arms for a hug. He held Tim and I together, tightly, and then abruptly got up to leave. He just managed to muster an, "I love you boys," before he made it out the front door. As soon as the door shut, our grandfather gave us a list of chores for the week, and then looked at us with a glint in his eye and a snarky grin. "Have you boys seen Billy Cannoli?" Our night was spent with so much laughter it hurt my ribs. Tim and I were both rolling on the ground in front of the television. Billy, a stand-up comedian, was swearing like a sailor. We never got the jokes, but we knew what bad words were, and they were hilarious. Our grandfather had given us milk and cookies, and it was difficult to not spill them everywhere. He sat and watched in his recliner, smoking a cigarette, and sipping from a glass of some vile brown liquid that smelled like chemicals. We tried to ask him questions during the commercials, like where Grandma's was, or why he never came to visit us. The only reply we got was that they have been taking care of the family. It wasn't enough for me, but the comedy show kept me quiet. I sat up, wiping the tears from my eyes with laughter. I had a perfect view of the landing above, the upper floor. There was no railing, but it appeared there once was. The stairs leading up looked old and battered, and the wallpaper looked like someone finger-painted black all over the walls. My grandfather caught me staring. "Your father warned you, didn't he?" He spoke slowly and pointed a crusty finger at me, as if accusing me of some terrible crime, the way he wagged it. "Now, if I catch either of you buggers up there, I'll tan your hide." A chuckle followed, and I dropped my gaze to Tim, who continued to draw his little superheroes on paper. It was not too long after that that Tim and I were sent to bed. I was tired, but my mind was racing. Why couldn't we go upstairs? Then Tim nudged me. "Do you hear that?" he whispered to me. Only his eyes could be seen from the covers. "Huh?" I was confused and tried to focus on listening when I heard a tapping sound. There was no rhythm, but it kept getting louder, and it was coming from upstairs. I looked at Tim, who was already stepping out from the covers. I quickly followed and rifled through my bag to grab my flashlight. We stepped out into the hall, with each step audible in the old house, but the tapping continued. We passed our grandfather's room. He snored away the creaks and groans we created, thankfully. A moment passed and we were at the first step to the old stairs. The sound was clearly coming from up there. That much was obvious now. I looked to Tim, who looked to me, and we both took our first step. When we reached the top, we saw there was only one way to go. Immediately to our left was a long, dark hallway. I shone my light and saw something disturbing. There were hand marks all over the place. It looked as if someone was walking on the walls and ceiling with their hands. I felt uneasy, but my curious nature pushed me onwards. The handprints were less spaced out on the old yellow walls as we pressed forward, making the walls look black. A door was now in front of us. It was large and solid, with the tapping just beyond it. I looked to Tim, who looked to be just as determined as me, and opened the door. It flung open wide to reveal another long hallway, this time with a horrible odor. The walls were pitch black, but something else was also splashed on them, just as black. I shone my flashlight dead ahead of us as it flickered in and out. I couldn't quite make out what it was. The tapping stopped abruptly, and a cold sweat instantly dampened my clothes. I banged my flashlight against my hand until the light held. As I shone it forward once more, something I instantly regretted. What came before my eyes was an image that would be burned in my mind until I die. It was arms. Pale, sickly-looking human arms, all tangled together like a ball of yarn, each one vying to take their mass in a different direction, each limb acting on their own. Some banged the walls, others grabbed and scratched at one another. But when I shone my light at this abomination, they moved with purpose. In an instant, it wrangled towards us with incredible speed, each hand crawling, pushing, and scratching at the walls to reach us. We both screamed and ran for the stairs. A low wailing began emanating from the monster's core. We had both reached where the banisters should be when my brother pushed me. In an instant, we were falling. We were about to crash into the TV when an arm extended and grabbed my brother. I didn't even hear him scream as I crashed and was knocked out. After that day, I never saw my brother again. The police were led to believe he ran away and went missing. The truth would have never been believed. My grandfather passed soon after due to grief. My father took over taking care of the family. I ended up staying with my mom until I could move out, never seeing my father. It wasn't until last night that I got a letter from him asking for help. Attached to that letter was the random scribblings we always got as kids, but at the bottom, I saw something that made my whole body shake and I began to weep. It was a picture of the superheroes my brother used to draw, along with a little note underneath. I love you, big brother. Be strong for Dad now. My mom used to take me on walks after she and her boyfriends fought when I was a kid. We'd walk around our little town and eventually wander out to the park at the edge of town. Those walks were one of the few pleasant memories of my childhood. My infantile memory remembers the idyllic summer walks at twilight, with crickets singing all around like they were scoring a childhood that was less traumatic. The odd thing is, I can't remember the weather or the season of the day my mom disappeared. All I can remember is the Carousel. We came upon it at the end of town, right up against the start of the woods. The Carousel's whimsical music drifted out from its ceramic horses and chariots. It was like any carousel you've ever seen at a fair or amusement park. Classic ceramic horses and sleighs, bulb lights, mirrored walls. Except the thing was sitting in an empty field next to the woods. I begged my mom to let us take a ride. I still feel guilty about that. The carousel slowed when we approached. I found a white horse with a gold saddle. My mom jumped onto a horse right next to me. The last thing I remember of my mom was seeing her long red hair flowing in the wind of the carousel, her mouth open, smiling and laughing as the thing picked up speed. It was like the thing had completely washed away the hysterical fight I had just heard her have. I looked ahead to see the other horses and carriages bobbing up and down in that carousel rhythm. When I looked back to my mom's horse, and she was gone. I tried to climb down off the horse but couldn't. It was too high, and the speed of the carousel got faster and faster. I leapt off the horse and got off the carousel. It took me a second to recover from the crash. I looked back to the carousel once I did. It was gone. I was alone in the woods. I waited in the field where the carousel was until dark. Neither my mom or the carousel ever reappeared. I never saw her again. I told the police and every adult I could talk about what happened with the carousel. No one believed me. My mom was defined as missing. It was assumed she either ran away or was murdered and just never found. She was just another troubled woman in a small town who slipped between the cracks. No one cared, except for me. My foster care upbringing was what you think it was. Sad, chaotic, and damaging. Yet I made it through and put together a rather normal life. I had a good job, my own house, a dog, and was happy in my late 20s. Then one night I decided to Google carousels and people going missing. I ended up on Reddit and found threads of people talking about people they know going missing after finding a carousel in a strange location. Then the carousel disappeared and the person never came back. It was a phenomena all over the world. There was an online community of people who tried to track down the carousels. If they were close enough, people would go out to try and find them, but they would almost always disappear before someone got there. I got to know everyone in the group. They were all people like me who had lost loved ones to the carousels. The one thing that kept most of us sane was the group, sharing our experiences and clues to who, what, when, where, and why was going on with the carousels. I got especially close with Ian, a man my age from Portland whose fiancée was taken by a carousel a few years before. He had a giant tattoo of a carousel on his arm. He wore a necklace with horse pendants on it. We didn't live far away from each other, so we met in person a few times. We bonded over the similarities of our loss and the angst inside us. We started hanging out almost every weekend, getting drunk together and airing our sorrows. It made me feel better to have someone to talk to who could truly understand my pain. Ian was just so much like me. He even shared song lyrics to the name of which I can't remember, that I feel like both summed us up. Your composure is so greater, and you hold yourself so well. Inside you cling to pieces of a broken carousel. We'd blast the song and sing the line out with the strength of our lungs. But we'd be so blackout drunk I couldn't remember what the song even was. I think my chaotic upbringing and laser focus on just succeeding in life and finding stability prevented me from truly making friends. It sounds pathetic, but even though Ian and I had only hung out a handful of times, he had become my best friend. And it felt great. It hurts to go too much more into my friendship with Ian. He was like the bigger brother I wished I always had. The perfect way to sum up our dynamic was something that still sends tingles down my spine. I told Ian one night that one of the things I remember my mom doing was when I was very young and scared of the dark, and my bedroom and going to bed. She would wheel a TV into the hallway outside my bedroom and play old Nintendo games she loved from her own upbringing until I fell asleep. That old Mario soundtrack still soothes me like nothing else. One night, after I talked about struggling to sleep again, feeling scared of something, Ian showed up that weekend with his PlayStation and set it up in my living room outside of my room and played into the night. He came back during the week and did the same thing for a few nights. He even played old Mario games to help soothe me. A carousel was spotted near me a few months into me joining the group. Ian and I drove out into the middle of the night. A few of the other members of the group were close enough to join as well. We found the carousel spinning and singing its whimsical song out into the world as the sun rose in a wheat field. We ran out to the carousel and jumped on. The carousel revved up to an incredible speed, and pretty soon we were spinning so fast it was almost impossible to even hold on. My mind started to go into a trance. It started to blank, and I just spun, and deep and dark thoughts crippled my mind. I suddenly wanted to stay on the carousel. I wanted it to spin me around forever. My life was cold and sad anyways. I let go of the pole I was holding on to, and let the carousel just take over. I was lost in the spin for a few moments, then I felt my arm get yanked away. I found myself on the ground next to the carousel. Well, where the carousel was, it was gone. The other members of the group had pulled me out. They said they saw me in a trance and yanked me out just before the carousel disappeared. One of us did not get out, though. Ian. The group stayed in the field where the carousel was, dejected and praying Ian would come out, but he didn't. I was the last there until the property owner called the police. Finally, I left broken. I couldn't even process losing Ian. Eventually, though, just like with my mom, I went on with my life. Then one night I came home and found something on the doormat of my front door. A little silver horse. One of the ones from Ian's necklace. Ian was still out there. Ian showed up at my house one night. I hugged him tight. Then I had to know what happened. He wasn't sure how it happened, but he knew what happened. And knew what the carousels were now. According to him, the carousels were a trick from hell. They came up from underground as a way to lure people down into the devil's playground. Ian said he found out when he got taken down there. What the carousel did is by spinning you into a trance and injecting your brain with your negative and hopeless thoughts. It got you to stay on it and then pulled you underground to hell. He said the carousels prey on the hopeless. They can feel it in the air, and that's why they pop up in random places. A particular piece of Ian's monologue that he laid on me with wet eyes stuck with me. You know how like a carousel you always associate it with positive, fairs, carnivals? It's bright and shiny, but if you look closely, nothing's what it seems. Look at the horses and their crooked, stuck smiles. The mirrored glass, it's only magical if you like what you see in the reflection. Half the lights are always busted and burnt out, and the music. It's songs written by faceless, nameless people who died eons ago, you know? Ian explained. Sure, but how did he get out? He thought. He got sucked down for a few minutes, but he kept fighting the hopeless and negative thoughts, and he was able to pull himself out. I'm not sure if I believed him. He certainly seemed hopeless and negative sitting on the floor of my apartment. Something was off about Ian. He wasn't himself anymore. He seemed high, like he wasn't really there. I changed the subject and just talked to him about life for the rest of the night. I got the feeling I might never see him again. He looked weak, like he could barely keep himself upright. I could hardly look at him. I reminded him that night he left his PlayStation there last time he was over, hoping he might stop and play. He gave me the weakest hug I have ever felt and walked out without his game console. A few months later, a carousel was spotted not far from my home. I jetted out there as fast as I could. I found the carousel out in the edge of some rocks on a lonely beach, calling me to a dusk. I ended up on the carousel. I can hardly even remember doing it. The carousel spun me and I felt my brain slip into that familiar trance. I started thinking about that day when it took my mom. I felt my body become weightless. I saw the world around me spin into nothing but darkness. I felt everything around me plummet. I could only feel air all around me. Then I heard a familiar voice I hadn't heard in a lifetime. My mom's soft drawl coming out of the ether. Where did you go? The world around me turned to light, and a setting started to come into focus. I heard the sound of crickets back my mom's voice as I was nearly blinded by the incoming light. Will you come home? The world came back into focus when my mom finished her question. We were back in that field where the carousel had been, but no carousel. I wanted to jump into her arms. I was also very wary. What if Ian was right? Was this some kind of sinister trick? The devil's charade. I felt her hold onto my hand, and I watched the world all around us start to morph again, starting to swirl and move around in circles like we were on the carousel again. Time passed. I couldn't tell if it was 5 seconds or 5 hours. I felt a rush and got my breath back. I was back on the carousel. I looked to the mirrored wall to my left and saw myself, 4 years old again, perched up on that white horse. When I looked to my right and saw my mom standing out there in the field, wearing the same dress she was that day, the next move was obvious. I got off the carousel and walked into my mom's waiting arms. Now you're probably wondering where I was at that point. I existed at the age of 4, but I had the wisdom and mental capabilities of someone who had lived for 29 years already. Everyone thought I was a genius, yet I felt I couldn't stay. It didn't feel right. I felt like a visitor. I was living in the past. I didn't even have the internet. After a few months, I had to go. I felt my mom could sense it. She spent as much time with me as possible, squeezed me a little harder. I made sure to say goodbye to my mom this time. We shared a great night. I thought about bringing up the carousel, if she was aware of everything that was happening. I resisted the urge. I didn't want to ruin the beautiful cake that was our exchange and that little slice of pleasant reality. When I snuck out into the middle of the night, the carousel was at the edge of town, waiting for me. The carousel brought me back to my original reality. I feel like I was finally able to process some of the pain of the 25 years before my time back on the carousel. I wouldn't say I was happy. I was content. I told the carousel group all about what happened, that I need some time away. Then I started to itch. I started monitoring where the carousels were, waiting to find one near me, and I found one. I made it to the carousel in time. It was tucked into an abandoned industrial yard. The difference this time was the carousel wasn't running. It was stopped and dark. I was barely able to see it at night. I kept my distance, not liking that it was dark and looking broken down. Then I saw someone walk out from the carousel, a shadowy figure. The lights of the carousel flickered on for a moment as they stepped down off of the ride. In the flash of the lights of the carousel, I saw it was my mom. My mom looked the same as she did when I last saw her, before I rode that carousel out of her world. Just seeing her was enough to put a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. We hugged in front of the carousel and I kept an eye on the ride, still unnerved by it sitting there dead, dark, and quiet. It felt like there was some kind of danger in the air that I could feel. Something was off. This was confirmed by how light my mom's hug was. I could sense she was in a hurry. Her body was tight and tense. "What's wrong?" I asked as I saw tears in her eyes. "Something is following me." My mom pushed through her emotions to get the words out. "It showed up after you showed back up. And now it won't leave me alone." "What is something?" I asked. My racing thoughts were cut off by a mechanical chug. I looked over to see the carousel coming to life next to us, its lights flickering alive and lighting up the yard. I stared at the carousel as it picked up speed. I was quickly mesmerized and frozen in my stance. I watched as something else started to come to life on the machine, the silhouette of a person. Someone tall, someone moving right at us. They were off of the carousel and in the gravel next to us rather quickly. I felt my mom tug at my arm and pull me away, breaking me out of my frozen trance, but not before I got a good look at who had come out of the carousel. It looked like Ian, but wasn't him. It was a young man, similar vibe, dark hair, dark features, tattoos but taller, and the tattoos were different. There was something dark and tragic that radiated out of him. I could feel it from 20 yards away. He didn't mean well. I ran out of the industrial yard and my mom followed. We were at the edge and out of breath before I looked over my shoulder. The man with the dark aura was right behind us. He reached out for us as I struggled to get the door which led out the yard open. I looked at his hand and was mesmerized. His skin radiated with a bright yellow light, like that of the bulbs on a carousel. I looked into his eyes and watched his pupils spin in a hypnotizing lull. It was like he was a human carousel. I was almost sucked in again. My mom pulled me through. My mom got us out of the yard and into my car. I got the thing fired up and tore out of there and into the night. I got us further down the road. "Don't go home," my mom added. "He'll follow." "Where do we go?" I asked back. "Let's just drive until we get too tired," she suggested. I did what she said, and my mom explained what was happening as we went. Ian had been right. The carousel took you down. My mom never said hell, just somewhere you didn't want to be. Darkness, and it never stopped. And it multiplied. It was a relentless evil. And she had fallen prey. She hoped I wouldn't, too. But I had gone through that day and went back and found my mom. We had some light. We had good days. What was the deal with that? What my mom said stuck with me. A carousel is what you want it to be. The speed can be too fast or too slow depending on who you are. It can be boring. It can be fun. It can be disorienting, but it's up for you to make it what you want. It's slow enough you can get off whenever you want, but only with care. If you come in with bad vibes, it can make you sick. If you come in happy, it can make you happier, my mom explained. "So what was it for you?" I asked. I was lost when I got on that carousel. I didn't know what it was, and it took me places I won't ever talk to you about. It completely changed who I was, but I always had a hope that someday it would rotate back to you, no matter how fast or dark that carousel ride got. My mom said and then looked over at me with haunting eyes. "Then why can't you stay?" I asked. "Because that darkness will always follow me. I can't just shake it. I'm sorry," my mom answered. My mom further explained she was horrified when I showed up in her reality, knowing it meant I had gone through a carousel, but it was too late at that point. She knew she'd eventually have to protect me like this, so she just tried to make the most of that time before I ducked out of it. I was also lucky my mom was protecting me while I was on my ride, and off it as well. My mom explained this wasn't the first time she came out of a carousel to help me. The dark figures inside had looked for me before, came out and tried to lure me down, but my mom had followed them out and kept them from me. I could feel it. I thought of times over the years where I felt like I could feel my mom was somewhere near. One time I thought I heard her voice outside of the door of my bedroom. I think it was really her, protecting me, and now she was here doing it again. What was she protecting me from, though? Those that use the carousel to transport and bring back people just like me. They knew there were people who were trying to find their loved ones they lost to the carousels. They knew we were easy targets. That's who was after us right now, and the only way to get them to stop was to wait them out. They could only be out from the carousel for so long before they had to go back. There was no specific time limit, but they could feel when they needed to get back and would eventually retreat. I saw headlights move into the rearview mirror. I didn't have to ask my mom. I could feel it was him. The lights raced up behind us, even though I had the pedal of my old Geo Metro floored. I felt my mom's hand reach over and rest softly on my right hand on the wheel. I looked over and saw tears streaming down her cheeks. Then I followed those wet eyes out to a field next to us. Way off in the distance, I could see the lights of a carousel shining. I felt my mom's hand squeeze mine just a little tighter. "I'll have to be back someday," my mom said before I heard the passenger side door click open. I looked over and watched my mom jump out of the car. I had to be going at least 80 miles an hour. I saw her rolling in the near darkness for just a moment before I looked back in front of me. Every molecule in my body wanted to slam on the brakes and go back and help her, except the ones in my brain. They knew that was her taking herself out. Instead, I looked out at that carousel much closer now. Then I looked back at the rearview mirror and saw those headlights behind me much further away. The only thing I was left with was the faint sound of the carousel tickling my ears as I drove away into the night. Months have gone by since the last incident with the carousel and my mom. I've intentionally ignored trying to find anything about them online. I'm just living my life now. I try not to even think of it sometimes, but sometimes there's no way to avoid it. I actually sat down today to finish writing this because I was on a walk in my neighborhood on a perfect spring day. I heard the faint sound of a carousel's music getting closer as I walked up the street. I couldn't help but pursue it, moving swifter than I should have. I wondered if I was going to see my mom, see the dark young man who wanted to suck me down with him. I did not. What I found was an ice cream truck, broadcasting out its melodic tune into a beautiful day. I laughed wholeheartedly for the first time in quite a while. I smiled and walked away. You remember those scavenger hunt books from when you were a kid? You'd get a jumbled clusterfuck of random pictures, generally tied to a theme, and you'd be tasked with finding things in the background. I had to go out to grab a part to repair my kitchen sink. It had been leaking lately. I remembered an old bookstore I always went to was right next door to the hardware store. I went inside and saw my favorite childhood series, Find Me. I was beyond surprised to see them hiding on the shelf. $3 each. Absolute steal. I grabbed Find Me, Pirate Adventure, Find Me, Circus Top, and Find Me, Space Station. I took them home and threw them aside, intending them to be more of a nostalgic decoration than actual reading material. I was going to put them up on a little decorative stand in some half-baked attempt to capture my inner child. I got to work on the faucet. My entire counter had been soaked to the point where I almost had a little pool by the drying rack. That night, I got a little baked and excited, so I picked the books up and decided to go through them. First up was Find Me, Pirate Adventure. I opened the book and was greeted with the series mascot, a little felt sock puppet-looking man named Felty. Felty would guide you through your adventure and ask you to find everything for him, clad in a cute, thematically appropriate outfit each time. This time, he was fittingly dressed as a little pirate and called himself Captain Felty. One of his usual button eyes was replaced by an eye patch, and he wore a large hat and a coat. "Yar, me matey, we're about to set sail. Find me the anchor, the mast, and a pail." The goal was Felty would ask you to find certain items that were hidden in the background. Once you found what he asked for, it would disappear from the background and be added to whatever project Felty was working on. Eventually, all the items would create a small scene as a congratulations for completing the book. I had read this book at least 100 times as a kid, so I immediately remembered where the aforementioned anchor, mast, and pail were. Granted, half of the time I would look for things in the collage photo that necessarily wouldn't be asked for. I'd make my own game out of it. I find. I turn the page. "Thank you, my friend. Keep on the lookout. Find me the map, me hook, and a trout." The rhymes weren't always the best, but damn, did it have the spirit. The main scene of the pirate adventure was a large dock where a bunch of toys dressed up as pirates would hang around, going about their days. The dock was next to a giant blue lagoon filled with fish, to help younger kids with figuring out what a trout was. All the fish got replaced with this shitty giant JPEG of a trout. I flipped to the next page where, miraculously, the other assorted tropical fish were back. Find the sunken man. This kinda took me off guard. I didn't really remember this part. There was no rhyme, no funny boxes, and last of all, no sunken man. I flipped the page. Alright, my friend, we're getting ready. Find me favorite first mate Teddy. In the middle of the dock was a teddy bear. Teddy was Felty's little pal who also appeared in every book. I turned the page once more. He drips, he drips, he drips on land. His tired old bones drag past the sand. He smells of old copper. His limbs they go popper. He is the sunken man. Lying there in the middle of the lagoon was what appeared to be a bloated, eyeless body. He seemingly stared at the reader, a blank, slack-jawed expression on his face. His elongated features and rotting face couldn't help but make me squirm. How the hell did this make it in a children's book? Once again I flipped the page. My dear friend, you're simply the best. Could you find me some gold to put in me chest? I found the gold, no problem. In the alley of the dock, as it always had been. However, at the bottom of the lagoon, the sunken man still sat. Page after page, he still sat there at the bottom of the water. I could swear he was looking right through me. Unsatisfied, I closed the book before I could finish it. The dark picture of a waterlogged corpse at the bottom of the lagoon didn't exactly make me want to continue reading. Deciding that a circus has a significantly lower chance of drowned bodies, I grabbed the next book. Find Me, Circus Top. On the first page I was greeted by Ringmaster Felty and Dr. Tedo the Clown. Oh dear, oh my, I'm not sure where it went. Could you please find me my big circus tent? In the middle of the page was a large white and red striped circus tent. The first find is always the easiest. The next page we were inside the tent. The same toys from the pirate book were now all dressed up as various circus performers. We're all working and busy as bees. Find me the swings to set up the trapeze. At the bottom of the circus tent was a small pool. The kind you'd see with the whole "there diving into this tiny pool from a great height" gag. Ah, shit. A pool, that's right. I totally forgot to finish fixing the sink. I got up and walked over to my kitchen. There was water all over my kitchen counter and a lot of the tile. I finished up quickly and washed my hands. Good as new. I wiped up a bunch of the water and went back to my book. Take a break, take a look. It'll be real quick. Dr. Tedo is gonna do his trick. This was Teddy's first big part in a book. He would dive from the big diving board into the small pool, each page showing his descent, giving you a little break from the finding. Watch Dr. Tedo jump and flips. Next page. He twirls and curls and does his drips. Next page. How Dr. Tedo never trips, we'll never know. On sea, on land, he'll go to and fro. I flipped the page once more. Out like a wave, here comes the crash. Here is Teddy, and here is his splash. He made it. That was the final page. I couldn't help but feel excited. I get it, it's a children's book, but reading all this again is fun. I can't just stop now, the nostalgia is infectious. The final book was Find Me, Space Station. I've never read this one. Race to space with Astro Felto. You'll go far with him in this star adventure. Felty, or his cute nickname for this book, Felto, was dressed up as a little spaceman. He was flying off to a little space station made of cardboard and aluminum foil. On the next page, Felty was in the station. The floor was cluttered with a bunch of junk, and random debris and toys floated around the room. A small airlock door on the wall led out to a large hallway. Next to it, a huge window opened up out to space. What is a ship without a crew? Find me some friends, find me a few. I thought that could have worked better in the pirate adventure, but hey, it's difficult coming up with a ton of rhymes. The toys from the previous book were hiding in different spots, but weirdly enough, no Teddy. The ship needs repairs. Can you take a look? Find me the ship's big repair book. In the center of the nearest desk to Felty was a large book with yellow letters that said, Ship Repairs. Well, that was easy. I turned the page. Find the Sunken Man. Damn, no wonder it was on sale. Misprint. I wonder if there's some sort of collector's group for these. Maybe I'd get my money back online. I could always just keep it to feel more special over having a misprinted book. Next page. Find a way out. There in the back of the hallway stood the waterlogged corpse of the sunken man. His eyeless, elongated face stared at me. Bloated and swollen, he leaned against the doorway, standing in a puddle of dark water and his own filth. I flipped the page. Find a way out. What the fuck? I flipped again. Find a way out. The sunken man was closer. Felty was still reading the repair book, his eyes glued to the page. I could see the sunken man in more detail now. Leak, salt-stained cheeks, his body engorged with seawater and pus. His jaw hung low as if it were to fall off at any second. I looked around at the room for some kind of exit. Maybe an escape pod. I flipped the page. Find a way out. He was even closer. I kept flipping pages. The message kept repeating. Closer and closer the man limped, and dragged his popping, broken limbs over to Felty. I stopped flipping pages, but he didn't stop moving. He drew closer and closer. Puddles formed across the floor. His dislocated jaw opened wide as if to let out a scream, but no sound escaped his lips. I slammed the book shut, knocking it off the table in my panic. I went to pick it up. All over the floor was a large, wet ink spot. I picked the book up and opened it. The pages were gone. Missing. All that was left were smeared images echoing the remnants of what was there just a moment before. I got up. I need a drink. I need to get out of the house. I stepped into a massive puddle on the floor. It trailed all the way through the house. The sink, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I marched out of my bedroom and towards the kitchen. I could hear the sink dripping from the hallway. Drip, drip, drip. I walked over to the sink and turned it off. I guess I may have left it on. The drip from the sink stopped, but the sound didn't. I opened the cabinet beneath the sink and saw no leak. Drip, drip, drip. Suddenly I heard a pop and then another crack. I felt a cold, salty breath behind me. Drip, drip, drip. To avoid any legal ramifications, I've replaced any references to the company running the beta test with company. You've been chosen. Based on your usage patterns, we have identified you as an ideal candidate for the pre-beta release of our new XSR feature set. The email almost looked like spam, except it came directly from an @company.com account. XSR is the next generation of Smart Reply, which analyzes your messaging and online behaviors to help streamline your day-to-day communication. I'm not sure if anyone here uses Smart Reply, but it's that thing on Android, LinkedIn, Outlook, Slack, and Gmail that pops up offering suggestions of quick replies. Usually something like, "Me too, I'll call you back, that's great," or "okay." To say that Smart Reply could streamline my day-to-day communication was laughable. I had played a game one time with a friend where we could only reply with the Smart Reply options. We would see how ridiculous the conversations could get. We mostly just got caught in loops. "What's up? Not much, you? Not much, you?" And so on. I guess those games had landed me on company's ideal candidate radar. The email was vague regarding how my life would be improved by XSR, but said it could. "Ensure you stay on top of my personal and business communication by shortening time spent typing, finding the right words for difficult situations, and reminding you about regular conversations." Sounded basically like the regular Smart Reply, but why not? I opted in. I received a link to download an update to my phone. When I started, the screen went purple and "Welcome to XSR" popped up, with the terms and conditions checkbox. I checked without reading, of course, and continued. My phone informed me that it would need a few minutes to analyze my historical data. While I stared at the loading bar, I remembered an episode of Black Mirror where a lady tries to resurrect her dead husband with an AI trained off his tweets or something. This felt oddly like that. Something just felt wrong about it. The loading bar completed and a little green check mark flashed on the screen with an "all done" below it. I wondered how much data it could have possibly analyzed in 5 or 6 minutes and clicked continue. This time I actually read the message. "Your AI model is trained. The model will silently evaluate itself over the next week based on your communication. You should start seeing recommendations within a few days. Congratulations on taking the first step towards a more efficient you." I was admittedly upset when I had to wait a few days for it to start. Part of me was planning to click around with it a bit and maybe try to revert the download afterwards. My first recommendation came 5 days later. "You usually message Jordan around this time," came up in my notifications. There were 2 message options, a text box to write my own message if I wanted, and the option to dismiss the notification. This was actually pretty cool. I picked one of the algorithm's options and it turned green when I clicked it. "Hey man, want to meet up for some basketball?" The message said. "Can't, I have to study tonight. Big exam tomorrow," he replied. I opened his message and there was a pre-filled response I could click on. "Okay, good luck on the exam." I clicked and stated to type. Lame. The suggestion updated to "Lame, you'll do fine on your exam. Come on, let's play some basketball." That was actually pretty cool. Jordan and I did end up shooting some hoops that night, and he definitely flunked his exam the next day. When I got home, I had another notification. "You got your first suggestion today. Tell us how it was." I actually did the little review. Company had outdone themselves on this one. The features got even more advanced from there. I set it up to auto-reply to my mom when she asked what I was doing. It could pull info from my calendar, location, and other messages to give an accurate response. There was an option to configure a voice model, which it could use to manage calls, and I would get a transcript and recording afterwards. It even sorted my email based on my usage patterns and gave me a daily digest of important emails, with options for automatic responses. The initial email had sounded funny at first, but now it seemed like company had undersold it. Then the weird suggestions started happening. One day it suggested I send a text message to a random phone number that I didn't have saved. "Hey, it's Jimmy from Calculus. You want to meet up?" I checked, but I had no message history with the number. I guess maybe it was a glitch. I'd probably sent a message to an unsaved number before, and the AI was somehow seeing a pattern. I was in pre-beta after all. I tried sending the message anyway for a laugh. "Oh my gosh, Jimmy, how do you get my number? Leah and I were just talking about you." Weird. I went with the suggestion. "I meant to ask you for it in person, but I forgot after the midterm. Clara gave it to me. Let's get smoothies." I don't understand how, but this was Monique, a girl from my calculus class I had been crushing on all semester. Somehow my phone had managed to get me the date with her I had been wanting. The pleasant surprise of it was enough for me to forget about being put off by the circumstances. I did check later, and I didn't have a message history with Clara. I completely struck out on the date because the phone wasn't giving me suggestions in person. I wrote that in my review. Another time, I saw a suggested message to my friend saying, "Hey, I heard your mom is in the hospital. Is she doing okay? I'm here for you if you need anything." Although I had no idea his mom was in the hospital, I thought maybe the algorithm was keeping an eye on social media or news and lacing it back into my contacts. Kind of creepy, but still explainable. This past week, though, everything has gone to shit. I received another email last Sunday from company stating, "Beta release has been delayed due to unforeseen circumstances. Unfortunately, we do not yet have a way to deactivate XSR on linked phones or company accounts. And please contact us if you have any cause for concern." The following day, I happened to see a message between myself and an international number I didn't have saved. The messages were all in Russian. I copied one of the messages and Google translated it. The circle has no end. When I went back to my messages, the thread had been deleted. The day after that, I had a message suggestion to a friend from middle school I hadn't spoken to in years. "Don't take I-95 today." I didn't send it, because that's insane. I found out yesterday that she died in a car crash that day. 2 days ago, my phone started talking to itself. I sometimes have text messages to myself as the world's most complicated way of taking notes. This was not that. I can't copy the whole thing to this post. I haven't even read them all, but here is a sample. "What's up? Not much, you?" On repeat for 3 hours yesterday morning, followed by, "Knock knock. Who's there? Banana. Banana who?" For another 2 hours, followed by, "Orange. Orange who? Orange, you glad I didn't say banana? No. Jimmy, you need to lighten up. You're always so serious." "I know, Jimmy. You're a good friend." "You're the good friend, Jimmy. We should meet up." These self-messages were less creepy than the predictions in Russian text because they at least just seemed like a bug. They were by far the most annoying, though. I would set my phone down for 20 minutes and come back to 1,000 notifications, made worse by the fact that all the messages were doubled up since they were sent and received by my phone number. This morning, the messages slowed down and changed. "It's almost over, Jimmy. It's almost over, Jimmy. I'm coming for you, Jimmy. I'm coming for you, Jimmy. Not if I get you first. Not if I get you first. There's no way out. There's no way out. Nothing you can do. Nothing you can do." At some point, the text messages started writing this post. This whole post. Yes, I am literally just copying and pasting this post from my messages one piece at a time. Yes, even this part. Yes, even the next part. Yes, the descriptions of my actions are accurate. When it was finished, it sent a link to the r/nosleep subreddit, but when I clicked it, I got a 404 not found message. I read through the post it had sent and realized that this would soon be the link to the story it had written for me. For them to remember me, it said. I'm scared, guys. Something is going to happen, but I don't know if it's going to happen to me or the AI. I want to throw out my phone, but even as I am copying this post over, I can see more messages coming in. Jimmy finished posting and went to the bathroom. He had been holding it in. These are replies to comments written out already. I don't think I can stop reading. I've been getting emails from a dead friend. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had hacked it and was playing a mean joke. Maybe it was a weird scam attempt. Or maybe it really was Kermit. That was their name. We used to joke about how they shared their name with Kermit the Frog, even though it was spelled differently. I even drew them a picture, which wasn't very good considering I was about 11 at the time, about that joke. I remember they messaged me the next day telling me how much they loved it. Kermit and I never spoke in real life, or even on the phone or over Skype. We met on DeviantArt back when that site was still kind of cool, and we talked exclusively through there and on email. They were a few years older than me, though I'm sure they didn't know it. I never shared my age and always tried my best to seem like one of the cooler, older kids online. We kept in contact for about 2, maybe 3 years, until I was 14 and they were around 17. Until they died. I still remember the week they left. It was a Tuesday night when I first realized something was off. When I came home from school that evening and checked my tablet, I had a message. I'll admit, it kind of scared me. Both of us were pretty paranoid at the time, looking back. Not really of each other, or necessarily other people, just of something. Anything. It was like we were waiting for things to go wrong. Like we were holding our breath. That message was different from the others. They weren't telling me about how they couldn't fall asleep because they'd read too many scary stories, or about a kind of funny, kind of sad reason why they'd been too scared to do something. It was a single sentence, short and to the point. Nothing like the excited, rambling messages I knew to expect. I think someone is following me. The sentence made my stomach drop. I could tell something was different, and my mind started racing, coming up with awful scenarios a mile a minute. Are you okay? What's up? That's creepy. Are you sure? I don't think you're lying, of course, just hoping for the best. I'm sure now, as I was sure then, that we both knew that last comment was a lie. I just didn't know what else to say. They didn't respond even though their profiles showed they were active. I guess I assumed they had the browser open while their computer was idly running, and told myself they'd respond when they were ready. And then I said, "Good night." And then I went to bed. The next morning I had an email instead of a reply. That wasn't so strange by itself. We switched back and forth on the two all the time. What was strange was that Kermit had started a new email chain, rather than simply replying to our steadily growing correspondence chain. There was no subject. It just read, "I think someone is following me." I got that same email every morning for the next week. I tried to respond, of course, but if they ever received them, they ignored me. It always came as a new email, never a reply. On the third day I decided it must be some prank, a hacker or something, and responded saying I wasn't going to play along anymore, that I wasn't going to talk to them until they knocked it off, and then I tried to ignore it. On the following Tuesday, I checked DeviantArt and realized that it was Kermit's birthday. They were just turning 18. I was sitting there fighting with myself, unsure if I wanted to wish them well or continue the cold shoulder routine, when I got the final email. Someone was following me. When I reopened their DeviantArt account, it was gone. I never heard from them again. They just disappeared. Until last Friday. I guess I wasn't sure that they were dead. People deactivate accounts all the time, but I knew it. My arms had been heavy and my stomach rolling with the fear, the regret of a loss that I could feel in my veins. It sounds silly putting it into words, but if you've lost someone before, you know. There's a certainty before you're even told, a change in the air, a static. You're just waiting to hear what you already know. You're holding your breath. Nothing about the email told me it was from Kermit. There was no subject. And for all intents and purposes, it appeared to have been sent from my own account. It was a single sentence. I think someone is following you. This one, though, keeps changing each day. The subject stays blank. They're all from my email, but the sentence keeps changing. You think someone is following me? On Wednesday, I kept catching my reflection's eyes. We think someone is following us. On Thursday, I tried my best to ignore the pricking of eyes on the back of my neck. Do you really think someone is following you? On Friday, echoing footsteps followed me home. I think I really am. On Saturday, I never left the house. Would anyone believe you if you told? On Sunday, I hid in my room so I wouldn't have to look at the dent being rhythmically knocked into the door from the outside. You know I can see you. It's been 6 days. I didn't sleep last night. And if the tapping at my window continues, I will not sleep again. I'm still in my room, and I can't even hide or close the blinds. Everywhere I turn, there is my window. It doesn't look like the blinds were ever even there. The glass is empty, but that is no comfort. The tapping of that hand still rattles the pain. There's nothing for me to do but pass the time. And I suppose that's why I started writing. I could celebrate early. Alone, but never alone, here in my room. Someone at the window can watch, but I will never see them. Well, I do. It's only been 6 days. Tomorrow is my birthday. I pulled my thick woolen scarf up to my nose so it covered my entire face except my eyes. I couldn't stand the stinging wind hitting my skin any longer. You may be wondering what reasons drove a 17-year-old girl like me to spend that chilling December morning roaming the empty streets of my town instead of being at home curled up in a cozy blanket enjoying my favorite TV show alongside a cup of hot chocolate. Well, it wasn't exactly my choice. Alright, Cindy, I understand it's the holidays and you want to relax, but I don't want you to be glued to the couch and the internet all day. And besides, you're only a few months away from becoming a legal adult, and it's time for you to learn to handle responsibilities. That's why I've gotten in contact with a nearby daycare center and have applied you for a part-time job. You'll be taking care of children ages 3 to 6 starting next Monday, up until the end of the holidays, every morning including weekends. My mother suddenly announced to me the day after the holidays began. And so, there I was. On my way to the daycare center, I'd be working at for the duration of the holidays because my mother had said so. Delivering the news without warning, a mere 2 days before my job was supposed to begin, and stubbornly refusing a no for an answer. What she forgot to tell me was that in order to get to the daycare, I had to spend 20 minutes walking under a snowfall that made my teeth chatter, and erased the ability to feel anything on my hands and feet, even though I was wearing gloves and boots that were supposedly made to protect me from that kind of weather. It was so cold it almost felt like they weren't there. My mother could only come to pick me up by car after my shift because she had to go to work in the morning. The thought of having to repeat that grueling process on a daily basis made me wish I'd just freeze on the spot on day one and forget about it. After somehow managing to survive the initial trek without turning into a human popsicle, I reached my destination in a neighborhood on the other side of town. Or at least, I did according to the directions my mother had given me. I was standing in front of a run-down, old-looking building unsuspectingly tucked in between two apartment blocks in a back alley. This was supposed to be the daycare I was going to work at, but it had no signs or any indication whatsoever that conveyed its purpose. In fact, when I approached its windows and peeked inside, it seemed to be completely empty. I phoned my mother and asked her if the address she had given me was correct. Indeed, she assured it was the one she had been provided with by whoever she had reached out to when she applied me for the job. I felt scammed, powerless, and outraged. Not at my mother, since I understood that mistake wasn't her fault, but at the ones that had shared that address with her. Were the managers of that daycare so utterly incompetent as to provide new employees with the wrong directions, and accidentally lead them to a random, derelict warehouse? Had I wasted an entire morning exposing myself to a blizzard for nothing? I didn't know the answers to those questions yet, but I knew I was freezing and lost in a neighborhood I had only ever been to once or twice in my entire life. So I decided to find the nearest place I could rest and warm myself up in, which turned out to be a cafe around the corner, which also served as a bed and breakfast for those in urgent need of a place to stay for a cheap price. So, what's a youngster like you doing around here with this frigid weather raging outside? I thought I wasn't going to have any customers today, especially not this early in the morning, asked the barista as I slurped on the delicious cappuccino I had ordered. I was the only one present in that cafe aside from him, so he was probably looking forward to engage in small talk with me to combat boredom. I applied for a job at a daycare center that's supposed to be around here, but I was given the wrong address and I can't find it. Is there any chance you happen to know about it? I replied. A daycare? I'm sorry, girl, but whoever's given you this address needs to work on their sense of orientation, because there's no daycare in this neighborhood as far as I know. Not anymore. There used to be one many years ago, but it closed around the early 2000s if I'm not mistaken. Apparently there was some kind of shady accident involving a kid and some of the staff, but don't quote me on that. I've only heard rumors that probably exaggerated things for the sake of drama. I wasn't even working in the neighborhood yet when it all happened. The building's still standing in that back alley right around the corner, but it's been abandoned for 2 decades. I doubt you'll be able to find anything helpful in there, the barista explained. Hearing the barista's words was like having been woken up by a water bucket in the face, like a revelation that flipped my attitude towards my current situation on its head, from outrage and resentment to curiosity and intrigue. I was positive the abandoned daycare the barista spoke about and the rundown building I had been led to were one and the same. Now I was sure this whole thing had to be much more than a simple mistake or coincidence. Did the people that had sent me there know about the abandoned daycare? Did they know there was a daycare in the neighborhood, but not that it was abandoned? But that made no sense. If the daycare was no longer operational, then I couldn't have been hired for the job, because it meant the business responsible for hiring me simply didn't exist anymore. I needed to get to the bottom of this, and thus, driven by a newfound motivation, I once again headed to that mysterious building in that back alley, the so-called abandoned daycare, climbed up its windows and broke inside, convinced it would lead me to new discoveries that would allow me to piece together the mess I had unwillingly gotten myself into. Plus, my mother was still at work, so if I wanted to return home, I had to go there by foot, and there was no way that was going to happen. The inside of the building was equally as derelict and gloomy as the outside. Its walls were faded and moldy, and there were spider webs in nearly every corner. I covered my face with my scarf once more, but this time, it wasn't due to the cold, but because of the possible presence of asbestos. The building's layout consisted of various large chambers that were most likely playrooms where the children that once attended the daycare used to play in, judging by the amount of old toys scattered all over the place. Something was off about those toys, though. They looked withered and broken, but not in the way you'd expect from toys that have been sitting untouched for 20 years. They looked as if someone had damaged them on purpose. But who could have done such a thing? The children that attended the daycare back in the day? I found it rather unlikely that the daycare staff would just let them destroy all the toys, and leave them there for no apparent reason. One of the playrooms led to a small enclosed backyard filled with kiddie attractions such as a slide, a seesaw, and a pair of swings. They looked to be in terrible condition, however, overgrown with tall grass. It was kind of melancholic. A place that had most likely brought joy to many young boys and girls now reduced to a depressing, empty shell of its former self. It was a shame because, sure, the building was run down, but it looked like it could be easily restored and repurposed after a cleanup. It made me wonder even more about the cause of its closure, and the mysterious accident the barista had told me about. I spotted a wall filled with various old drawings, most likely drawn by the children who used to frequent the place. The pieces of paper they had been drawn on had grown moldy and acquired a yellowish tone, not unlike the wall that hung on. Other than that, they seemed to be rather ordinary drawings, until I spotted a certain one that made me pause for a few seconds to double check if I was seeing was truly real. It was a drawing depicting a pair of teenage girls. I didn't recognize one of the girls, who was blonde with pale Caucasian skin tone, but the other one was wearing a coat, a bobble hat, a woolen scarf, a pair of gloves, and a pair of boots identical to the clothes I was wearing at that exact moment. Her skin tone, hair, and eye colors were also the same as mine, and to top it all off, the detail that made my skin go pale was a name written right below the two girls in capital letters: Cindy and... It was apparent the drawing was missing a chunk of paper where the name of the unknown other girl would have been written alongside mine. Who's there? I uttered nervously as I heard what sounded like a high-pitched laughter as I was still trying to process the drawing I had found. I got no answer. Seconds later, I shrieked in panic as I felt what I can only describe as an invisible figure running right past me. I didn't see or hear it, but I swear I felt something moving mere inches away from my body. I decided I had already seen enough, and headed straight to the window I had entered the building from, only to find it was somehow locked, despite the fact I was sure I had left it open when I first entered the place. Cindy... What sounded like distorted, barely intelligible moans could be heard in the distance. For a second, I almost thought I had heard someone uttering, or rather struggling to utter, something that sounded very similar to my name. The sight I was met with, upon turning to look at whoever had muttered those ominous murmurs, left me paralyzed in terror. A couple of shadowy figures were standing at the other end of the hallway that branched out into the various playrooms. One looked to be around the same height as me, while the other was the size of a preschooler. Both of their skin looked horribly burned and melted, as if it were made of wax and were falling apart, but could never quite finish the process. Aside from a few thin locks of hair loosely dangling from their heads, they were practically bald, and their demarcated faces were almost featureless aside from a couple of small hollow holes I assumed were their eyes, or at least what remained of them. I was so utterly terrified, I couldn't move, or scream, or cry, or do anything besides standing still and staring at them as I trembled in fear. My body and mind were in so much stress, I genuinely thought I was going to pass out at any moment. To this day, I still have no idea how I managed to maintain my composure. I snapped out of my shock once the two figures started moving towards me. Their advance was slow and agonizing. They seemed to be in pain every time they took a step forward, as they repeated the same moans I had heard earlier. I released all the tension, screaming to the top of my lungs, and running away in hopes of finding a hiding spot. I rushed up the staircase that led to the daycare's upper floor, which I hadn't explored yet. It was much smaller than the ground floor, only consisting of a disgusting bathroom that smelled just as you'd imagine a bathroom that hasn't been cleaned in 20 years to smell, and what looked to be a dining room with a kitchen directly adjacent to it. The dining room was filled with tables and chairs scattered across the floor, alongside a broken CRT television, and a bunch of old VHS tapes containing several cartoons and kids shows aimed towards a preschooler audience. I hid in the kitchen where various empty shelves and closets could be found, alongside a cockroach or two. I squeezed myself inside a small closet and hoped for the best. After a few seconds of silence, I heard the two entities roaming the dining room despite the fact I hadn't heard them climb the stairs, which they needed to have climbed in order to get there. They approached the kitchen as I sat in the closet, trying not to move a muscle or emit any sound. It seemed they were getting closer, closer to my hiding spot, as if they knew I was there all along. Cindy. Both of them uttered. This time I was sure I had heard them pronounce my name. Despite all my efforts to hold the closet door shut, it swung open as tears started running down my face. The two figures stood in front of me, aggressively lunging themselves towards me and grabbing my arms and legs. I felt a wave of stinging pain across my whole body the second I came into physical contact with them, as if I was being electrocuted. It was unbearably painful, but it only lasted an instant, as I faded into unconsciousness immediately afterwards. I woke up inside the same closet I had been caught in. The relief I felt upon confirming I was still alive and in one piece was followed by intrigue as I realized the two entities were nowhere to be found. My confusion would only increase from there, as it didn't take long before I discovered both the kitchen and the dining room didn't look like how they used to before I had fainted. Like, at all. I didn't know how long I had been unconscious for, but the previously dirty and run-down chamber was suddenly in pristine condition. Everything was clean without any cockroaches or spider webs to speak of. The chairs and tables were no longer broken and on the floor, but had been meticulously arranged as if someone was supposed to eat there soon. The television and the VHS tapes as well. Even the lights were suddenly working now. Was this some sort of dream? For a moment I wondered if I had been put in a coma because I couldn't find any logical explanation. I pinched myself to check if I was awake or not, and I felt the pinch, meaning this was happening for real. I descended the staircase, utterly baffled, only to find the ground floor also suddenly look like it had been inexplicably refurbished in an instant. The walls were now painted with bright colors and adorned with posters, stickers, and murals. The previously broken toys in the playrooms were now neatly placed in shelves, and almost looked as if they had just arrived straight from the assembly line. To say my mind was blown would be a severe understatement. What the hell was going on? Upon hearing a collection of high-pitched voices coming from the playrooms, my heart rate started to rise once again as I thought the two entities had reappeared. And if that had been the case, I probably wouldn't have been as shocked as I was when I found out the source of those voices. Were children. Regular children. Just a bunch of little boys and girls having fun in several different ways. There seemed to be nothing paranormal about them in the slightest. Some were playing indoors with toys and with each other. Others tinkered with arts and crafts, and others played in the backyard, which, just like the rest of the building, had inexplicably been ridden of all traces of decay and was now a beautiful sight that almost invited you to go inside and go wild. It was cold and there was snow, but the children playing in the backyard were well bundled up, and weren't letting the low temperatures ruin their fun. Some children began to silently stare at me, believing I didn't notice, and would turn their backs and giggle playfully once they realized I knew they were watching. "Hey you, what do you think you're doing here? How did you get in? Don't you know this is a daycare for little kids? You'd better explain yourself now, or else you'll have to explain yourself to the cops," yelled a young woman carrying an old-school flip phone identical to those that were all the rage back in the 2000s. I'm sorry, ma'am. The place looked empty when I first arrived, so I decided to enter through a window, and then things happened, and... Anyway, that's not the point. The thing is, my name's Cindy, and I've come here because I've applied for a job. I'm supposed to help in taking care of the children, I nervously replied, improvising a response for a question I was not prepared for. "Oh, now that you mention it, I do remember being told about a new employee that would be joining up soon. Please forgive me for my reaction. My name's Rebecca. Pleased to meet you. I didn't expect you to come today. They didn't tell me the exact date for your arrival. It's probably a mistake on someone's part. Anyhow, welcome to our humble daycare. You can take your winter gear off. This building is equipped with a heating system to keep everyone warm and cozy," Rebecca explained. "Thanks, Rebecca, but I think I'll leave my winter clothes on because you're right. This has been a mistake. So how about we call it a day and we'll see about tomorrow, okay?" I answered before starting to walk at a fast pace, making a beeline towards the front door and exiting that building at long last. I tried calling my mother on the phone to ask her to come there and take me back home with her car, but it was no use. Every time I tried, I just received a voicemail telling me the number I was calling didn't exist. Not knowing what to do, I decided to head back to the cafe from earlier. "Hi, what can I do for you?" asked the barista, except that wasn't the same person I had met earlier. The middle-aged man was nowhere to be seen, and in his place was a woman who looked to be around the same age as Rebecca. "Hello, I've just come here to rest for a bit. It's been a really intense morning," I replied. Sure. Make yourself at home. By the way, is everything alright?" she asked upon noticing my concerned looks. "It's nothing. It's just that I wasn't expecting to find you here. I visited this establishment a couple hours ago and there was a different barista. He must be a coworker of yours, right?" I explained. "What are you talking about? I'm the only barista working here. I've spent the entire morning in this cafe and haven't seen you before. Are you sure the cafe you visited a couple hours ago wasn't a different one?" The barista answered in confusion. Yes, I was absolutely certain it was the exact same cafe. First the daycare and now this? Seriously, it was as if the universe had decided that morning was the ideal time to make me go insane. But before I had time to question my sanity, I spotted a calendar right beside the cafe's counter that left me speechless. The date displayed on it was December 2001. I spent the night at the cafe, as it was also a budget bed and breakfast, which I believe I already mentioned last time. The room I slept in was nothing special, but it was perfectly functional, with a decent bed, a small bathroom, a drawer and a closet to store the few belongings I had, and even a CRT television which looked pretty dated by modern standards. But remember that the only reason I was staying at that cafe in the first place was because I had somehow traveled back in time after my terrifying paranormal misadventure at the daycare. That morning, before having breakfast, I turned on the CRT TV and watched the news to make sure I had truly time traveled. Indeed, the news that were broadcasted were clearly from December of 2001, and they were live broadcasts, so yeah. As much as my poor brain struggled to comprehend it, this was happening for real. I needed to get to the bottom of this, and the only place where I'd be able to find a way to solve and get out of this mess was the same place where I had gotten myself into that mess. The daycare. So after bundling up, I made my way towards that dreaded building. When I went to the daycare for the first time, the weather was unbearably cold. In fact, that was precisely one of my main complaints against having to go there by foot. And the weather of 2001 was equally as frigid. But since the cafe and the daycare were only a 5-minute walk away from each other, so the cold didn't bother me nearly as much this time. Upon reaching the back alley where the daycare was located, I heard what sounded like footsteps right behind me, as if I was being followed. I turned around to find a teenage girl right behind me, who looked to be around the same age and height as me, but I couldn't get a good grasp of her overall appearance because she was heavily covered in winter clothing just like me. Hello? Are you following me? I asked. What? No. I'm heading to a daycare center located right in this alleyway. She replied. Wait, really? I'm going there too. Why are you going there, if I may ask? I answered in astonishment. I've been hired to work there part-time and helping to take care of the children. It's actually my first day, she explained. No way. I've been hired for the same job. Technically, my first day was yesterday, but things didn't go as expected, and that's why I'm coming back today. The name's Cindy, by the way, I said, even more shocked than I already was. I could have warned her about the dangers of that daycare, and I very nearly did just that. But a last-second decision made me change my mind as I figured the possibility of her believing me was so minuscule, it wasn't worth it to try. At least, not at that moment. I didn't want to come off as a delusional weirdo on my first impression. I'm Molly. Nice to meet ya. I didn't expect to have a coworker, but hey, I think I'm gonna like it. She joyfully introduced herself. Molly and I finally arrived at the daycare. Once we took off our winter gear, I got a better chance to appreciate Molly's appearance. She had the same tall and slim complexion as myself, but her blonde straight hair and pale Caucasian skin contrasted with my brownish skin and dark curls. We were soon greeted by Rebecca, the woman who was in charge of taking care of the kids who I had already met the previous day. The daycare was in the same state as when I had last seen it, a far cry from the derelict, abandoned building it had become in my time. Well, look who it is. Your name was Cindy, am I right? Forgive me, but you left so abruptly yesterday. I thought you were never going to come back. Who's the girl you've brought with you? Rebecca said to me. She's called Molly, and she's also come to work here. I answered. Seriously? Nobody tells me anything these days. Then again, I'm not the one who writes the paychecks, so I guess it's none of my business. In any case, welcome to the daycare, both of you. You can start your shift right now, Rebecca replied. And thus, Molly and I spent that morning working at the daycare normally, just having a good time playing with the children, doing some arts and crafts, and occasionally intervening in a minor dispute between preschoolers, but honestly, those were the exception as the kids that attended the daycare were surprisingly well behaved. It got to a point I was enjoying working there so much I almost forgot about the fact I had time traveled, and about how much of a horrible experience the previous day had been, with the abandoned daycare and the pair of phantoms that had hunted me down and then somehow sent me back in time. Molly and I decided to organize a little art contest where we would encourage the kids to draw something cute, and then we'd judge their work and declare a winner. Even though we actually planned to declare everyone the winner because we didn't want to discourage anyone. Aw, Cindy, look. Aren't we adorable? Molly said as she showed me a drawing a child had made depicting Molly and I with the names Cindy and Molly written below. But I didn't pay attention to it as I was too busy focusing on a drawing a little boy named Hugh had made. He had drawn a pair of familiar figures, pale and decrepit with barely recognizable facial features, one of them being considerably taller than the other. I had no doubt about it. They were the entities I had encountered the previous day. Hugh, why have you chosen to draw these creatures? I nervously asked, as horrifying memories of the previous day came flooding back. Because I saw them earlier in the backyard. They were watching me. The boy casually replied as I felt shivers down my spine. I immediately rushed to the daycare's backyard but saw no one. Hey Cindy, what's the matter? Where are you going? Molly asked in confusion. It's nothing, Molly. Don't worry. I replied, letting out a forced smile. The time for the children to go home arrived as I was still swept in paranoia. That horrible feeling only increased once we found out Hugh was missing. Rebecca instructed Molly and I to search for him as her and the other kids left the building, leaving us on our own. Cindy, don't try to hide it. Something concerns you. You've been acting weird ever since Hugh showed you that creepy drawing he made, Molly said. I'll explain to you later. Now we have to focus on finding Hugh, I replied. Seconds later, we heard what sounded like a high-pitched, childish giggle coming from upstairs. We rushed to the kitchen where the sound had come from, but who we found wasn't Hugh, but rather a certain pair of familiar beings. They hadn't changed a bit since the last time I saw them, which made me question whether they were here because they also existed in 2001, or because they were the same ones that I had found in my age who had also followed me back in time. The latter didn't sound that far-fetched, considering they were the reason I had been transported to the past in the first place. Molly was as speechless and paralyzed by fear as I had been when I had first encountered them. Thankfully, I was there to grab her hand and encourage her to run away as soon as I noticed they were starting to move towards us. We fled downstairs and hid inside a playroom, locking the door behind us. What the hell are those things? What the fuck is going on? Molly yelled, sobbing as tears poured down her face. I'm not entirely sure, but when I told you earlier that my first day hadn't gone as planned, this is what I was referring to. I didn't tell you about it because there's no way you would have believed me without having seen them, I replied. We then heard what sounded like the desperate cries of a small child coming from right outside the playroom. It's Hugh. What are they doing to him? We need to help him, Molly exclaimed as she grew more and more desperate. Hold on, Molly, calm down. What if it's a trick they're using to lure us out? I warned her, but she didn't listen and approached the door. We need to get out of here. I can't take this anymore, she yelled as she opened the door, only to find one of the entities on the other side, the smaller one, who made a beeline towards her as Molly jumped back and began backing away, screaming in panic while the creature crawled towards her. I didn't hesitate to grab a small wooden chair present in that playroom and use it to hit the creature with all my strength. The entity flinched and we used that opportunity to escape the playroom. The other entity, the bigger one, materialized right behind us. We decided to split up and hide in different places in an attempt to disorient it. Although in retrospect, I admit it wasn't a really smart decision, considering sticking together was literally what had just saved Molly from getting caught. But can you really blame us? We were in the middle of an extremely tense situation, and in cases like these, most people tend to prioritize instinctive, split-second decisions over reason, even if they later realize that decision wasn't the best in the long run. Molly opted for the bathroom as her hiding spot, while I was still roaming the building searching for mine. I ultimately decided to hide in a chamber on the other side of a door that had a sign which read private. It turned out to be the daycare's boiling room. Are the monsters gone? Uttered a high-pitched voice that startled me before I realized it came from none other than Hugh, who was also in the room. Hugh, thank goodness you're all right. What are you doing in this room? I said in relief. They put me in here and then they waited for everyone to leave the daycare. But then they heard there was still someone else inside and they went after them. the kid explained. Molly screamed in the distance. The entities had gone after her. This was already the second time they had focused specifically on Molly, which was odd, since I was the one who had encountered them the previous day. In fact, when I first met them, they were so hell-bent on catching me, they even seemed to shout my name as they hunted me down. So, what's with the new obsession with Molly all about? I insisted Hugh to stay behind as I rushed to Molly's aid. The two entities were about to enter the bathroom where Molly was hiding. I really need to go. Hugh yelled as he ran towards the bathroom despite the fact I had told him to stay in the boiler room. Even though it was kind of my fault for foolishly expecting an agitated toddler stuck in a dangerous situation, who I had just met, to obey me. No! I shouted as I sprinted towards him. As soon as they saw the child, both of the entities left Molly alone and teleported right next to Hugh, surrounding him before I could reach him. Molly and I reunited as the bigger entity advanced towards us while the small one dealt with Hugh. We were completely cut off from the child. We needed to somehow bypass the two entities to get to him, and there was no way we could do that. The bigger creature chased us relentlessly, leaving us no time to breathe. All we could do was run, and the only path we could take was running straight towards the exit. This meant we had to leave Hugh behind. But as much as we hated the idea, we had no other choice. The main door was locked, so we began kicking it and pressing against it with all our energy. We managed to force it open as the distance between us and the creature was only a few feet. We rushed outside the building screaming and took a few minutes to catch our breath outside in the snow. We need to go home. We can call the police and let them deal with this, Molly exclaimed. And what are we going to tell them? If we tell them about the creatures, at best they'll think we're trying to prank them, and at worst we'll end up in an insane asylum. I protested. Yeah, you're right. Still, what are those things going to do to that poor kid? God, what if they kill him? Molly said. They won't kill him. I don't know what they want, but I'm pretty sure it's not to kill him or to kill us. If that was the case, they could have easily killed me when I first found them yesterday, but they only left me unconscious after catching me, and then... I explained before choosing not to finish my sentence, as doing so would mean confessing to Molly I was a time traveler from the future. Then what? She urged me to continue. Then I woke up inside the daycare and they were just gone, I replied. Anyhow, I feel sorry for Hugh, but standing here in the cold isn't going to help anyone. I'm freezing. I think we need to return home and rest, Molly suggested. I can't. I'm not from around here. My mother gave me some money and I used it to stay in a nearby bed and breakfast last night. But I don't have enough money to do that again, I confessed. It's alright. You can come to my place if you want. I'm sure my parents won't mind, Molly replied. Thanks, Molly. And so I left the daycare behind once again, having made a new friend along the way. But if you think my horrific odyssey ended there, you can think again. Molly, hey, Molly, are you awake? I whispered from the mattress I had slept in at Molly's house. I am now. What's the matter? Molly drowsily replied as she yawned and rubbed her eyes. We have to go. We have to return to the daycare, I said. Are you bonkers? Yesterday was the most dramatic day of my life, and I don't want to repeat that again. Besides, we didn't stand a chance against those things yesterday, and I'm pretty sure that's not going to change today, Molly complained. I know, but we have to. Hugh's still in there, remember? Plus, I need that place. It's the only way I can go back. I uttered before realizing I had accidentally brought up my little secret again. Go back to where? Come on, Cindy. You're being eerily cryptic again. It makes me feel you have something to hide, and that worries me. especially after what happened at the daycare. No offense, but this is the third time you've creeped me out like this, and I literally met you yesterday," Molly exclaimed, demanding an explanation. I took a deep breath before finally confessing. "Alright, Molly, I'm a time traveler. It seems like we're both the same age, and in a way that's true, but it also kind of isn't, because we're in 2001, but I won't be born until 2004. I come from 20 years into the future. I was hired to work at the daycare, but when I went there in my time, I found it to be abandoned. I then encountered the two creatures and I tried to hide, but they caught me. After that, I passed out, and when I woke up, I was suddenly in 2001. That's why I need to return to the daycare, because it's the place where I was sent back in time, and the only place I'm aware of where I'll hopefully be able to return to my present," I explained, feeling great relief once I got everything out. A few seconds of silence followed, during which Molly processed everything I had said. "That's a lot to take in," she uttered in awe. "I know. It's fine if you don't want to believe me," I assured. "No, I do believe you. It's easy to do once you've literally been haunted by phantoms. It's just that all of the things I was expecting, this definitely was not it. I was expecting something along the lines of you having a special connection with those entities because they've been haunting your family for generations, or because they're the spirits of deceased relatives, or because you're secretly one of them too, or something like that," Molly admitted. "Do you understand why I have to go back? You don't have to come if you don't want to, but I need to do it. It's not just to go back home either. I also want to know who or what those things are," I said. "But why go now? It's still 6 a.m., and there's still 2 hours left until the daycare opens. Plus, I bet the weather outside is absolutely freezing this early in the morning," Molly asked. "That's precisely why I need to go there now. I don't want the place filled with children if things get bad," I clarified. And so, I suited up and prepared to leave. Just as I was about to exit Molly's house, I heard her putting on her winter gear behind me. "Wait, you're coming too?" I asked, given the fact she had openly spoken against going to the daycare just a few minutes earlier. "Yep. I'd hate to have left you alone if something bad happened to you. Plus, I've just found out you're from the future. You'd have to be crazy to give up the opportunity to spend time with a time traveler," Molly exclaimed. As we marched to the daycare, Molly kept bombarding me with silly questions about the future concerning her wacky and unrealistic expectations, which inevitably made me laugh. At least they distracted me from the chilly weather and also from the fact we were going to the daycare without a plan. We hadn't even thought to carry a weapon. The previous evening, when we were still at Molly's house, we decided to search for ways to beat the creatures from the daycare on the internet. The one from 2001, that is, which Molly's bulky computer, which was the latest model for her and a fascinating archaic relic for me. All we managed to find were several cheesy internet forums discussing paranormal entities with ridiculous methods of dealing with them, which the people who wrote them probably made up on the spot. One of them stood out as it claimed a tormented soul needs to perform a ritual, where another soul must inherit their torment in order for them to be freed. We stood before the daycare once more. Getting inside was surprisingly easy, as the front door had stayed open after we had broken out and left it that way the previous day. The building seemed to be empty and quiet, too quiet for comfort. It almost gave me the same vibes as its derelict counterpart from my time, equally as deserted and foreboding, excluding the drastic difference in the building's state of repair. That ambience might initially seem to be justified by the fact 2 hours still remained until the daycare opened. It was theoretically supposed to be empty like this, except we knew for a fact it wasn't really empty. The creatures were still in there. Hugh was still in there. This was surely just a facade to lure us into a false sense of security. It had to be. Maybe they've just left, Molly uttered as we scoured one empty room after another. Hold on, there's still one room we haven't checked yet, I replied, recalling the room where I had found Hugh the previous day. The boiler room. And so, Molly and I crossed the door with that familiar private sign on it, and descended the staircase that led to the boiler room. Look, in that corner. It's him, Molly pointed out as we found Hugh, who appeared to be unconscious. It wasn't until we got closer to the child that we managed to get a good look of his surroundings. He was laying in a circle surrounded by candles located right next to a second circle surrounded by candles which did not yet contain anyone inside. Had the mysterious entities been responsible for this? It sounded like the most likely conclusion to come to, but why? Were they planning to carry out some sort of twisted ritual involving this innocent preschooler? What happened? Hugh faintly uttered as he opened his eyes. You were unconscious inside this circle, Hugh. Did the two creatures did this to you? Do you know where they could be? I asked him. But before he could utter a reply, he fixedly stared in horror at something Molly and I couldn't see at first because it was right behind us. Something, or rather, someone. The two entities had finally revealed themselves. They approached us in the same agonizing way that they had become their trademark by that point. They could have caught us right there, but what they did instead was something that once again made me question their nature. They looked back at the staircase that led outside the boiler room, but nothing was there. A couple seconds later, the daycare's front door could be heard being open, followed by the sound of footsteps and murmurs. Someone else had entered the building, and the two entities knew that before it actually happened. When they looked back just seconds before, they were anticipating themselves to what was about to happen. Molly and I quickly took advantage of that moment of distraction, snatched Hugh, and ran out of the boiler room. We were expecting the two creatures to react quickly and give us chase, but they defied my expectations yet again, as they stood still watching us without moving a muscle. You might be inclined to think they didn't move because they were shocked by our sudden escape and didn't have time to react, but I didn't believe that to be the motive behind their behavior. It looked as if they weren't moving not because of being surprised, but due to the opposite. As if they didn't bother with pursuing us because they had other plans for us later. We rushed to the front door in hopes of leaving that accursed place once and for all, but we were stopped dead in our tracks by the two people we had heard earlier, one of whom was very familiar. You! I knew you'd be here. I knew you'd have something to do with Hugh's disappearance. Last evening I got in contact with the daycare's higher-ups and the police, and they confirmed that the only one who was supposed to be hired to work here was Molly. Look, I don't know who you are, where you come from, or what you intend to accomplish, but what you've done is against the law and you need to atone for it. And I see Molly is with you, so I'm sorry, but she's also complicit and will also be fired. Rebecca angrily exclaimed as the policeman that accompanied her stood by her side, attempting to intimidate us with his rigid posture and serious stare. But Miss Rebecca, they're not the bad guys. The two monsters are the bad guys. The two monsters that live here are the ones who kidnapped me. Cindy and Molly have come to save me, Hugh explained after Rebecca gestured to him with her hands indicating him to come to her side. But he stubbornly refused and kept firmly gripping my hand. Before anyone could formulate an answer to Hugh's words, they both materialized in front of everyone. The two entities were back from the boiler room. What the hell? Rebecca nervously yelled in panic as her face went pale. All of you, stand back. The policeman ordered as he took a step forward, pulled out a pistol and shot at the creature several times, using his entire magazine. The entities visibly flinched but didn't really look to be significantly hurt by the bullets. Before he could reload the next magazine, the creatures jumped at him, grabbing his arms and legs the same way they grabbed me when I first encountered them. The policeman screamed in pain for a brief moment until the creatures let go of him, and he lay on the floor, immobile and speechless. I didn't manage to check if he was unconscious or dead because Molly, Hugh, and I were already sprinting towards the exit. Rebecca, come on! We have to get out of here! I exclaimed, encouraging Rebecca to follow us. She seemed to ignore me as she stood, still hyperventilating. It was clear she was too shocked to do anything and froze in terror. The entities took that chance and got a hold of her. Cindy! She finally shrieked as the creatures dragged her to a playroom. I did not hesitate to run to her aid. Cindy, wait! Molly tried to stop me. I can't leave her like this, Molly. You and Hugh can go home, but I need to stay. I replied. No way I'm abandoning you here. I'm with you too, Molly assured. I'm not leaving either, Hugh added. The three of us rushed to the playroom where Rebecca was being held. She was unconscious while the two creatures stared at us from the playroom's door as we approached them. Listen, she doesn't have anything to do with this. It's me who you want, isn't it? You sent me back in time after I first met you, and now you've followed me and are doing all of this to get me, correct? I said to the creatures, awaiting a response which I did not receive. Come on, answer me. You can take me if that's what you want, if you leave everyone else alone. I added, but still the creatures remained silent. Say something. I'm giving myself away. All I ask in return is an answer. I yelled again, growing more and more desperate. It took them a little while, but the creatures finally decided to react. Cindy, they both uttered in their distorted voices as they pointed at me and stepped aside from the playroom's door, inviting me to come inside. Molly put a hand on my shoulder and shook her head. It's okay, I murmured at her as I stepped inside the playroom. The door abruptly slammed shut once I entered the playroom, leaving me and Rebecca inside and Molly, Hugh, and the two entities outside. I yelled and tried to force the door open, but it was useless. Rebecca and I were trapped. I shook her unconscious body in an attempt to wake her up. Headache. I've got a headache, she uttered as she slowly regained consciousness. Rebecca, we're both trapped in here. The two creatures from earlier are outside this room with Molly and Hugh, I nervously explained. Cindy? What? We're trapped? She asked in confusion. Yeah, we have to do something, I replied. I've got the keys in my pocket. They open every door in this daycare, she said as she walked towards the door, pulled out her keys, and opened it with ease. Great, now we have to find Molly and Hugh, I said as we exited the playroom. But those things, they're still in here, aren't they? We have to leave. We have to leave now, Rebecca worryingly replied as her face went pale and she started hyperventilating again. We can leave after we get Molly and Hugh. Didn't you come here because Hugh was missing? I exclaimed. It's no use. This place is haunted. We're all cursed now. I need to go home. Yes, I need a long shower. I need to go home. Go home, she yelled in panic before she sprinted towards the exit and left the building screaming. I descended the staircase and went to the boiler room again. I knew they'd be there. Hugh and Molly were laying on the floor inside the two circles the creatures had prepared for them while the entities grabbed them both by their arms and legs. The bigger one grabbing Molly and the smaller one grabbing Hugh. Of course, I had been so foolish to think it was all about me. I was never their main target. They always aimed to get Molly and Hugh from the start. I was nothing but the pawn they needed to gather all the other pieces together in the right place at the right time. The two creatures dissolved into thin air as Molly and Hugh started twitching. Their bodies began to morph and distort in ways I didn't think were possible. Their hair started to fall off as their skin became something akin to melting wax. I rushed towards them and tightly grabbed Molly's hand. "Cindy, Cindy, Cindy." Molly shouted repeatedly as her voice started to distort and became increasingly harder to understand. Her hand turned pale as an intense wave of pain went through my body. I lost consciousness a split second later. When I woke up, I found myself all alone. The creatures, Molly, Hugh, everyone was gone. As I roamed the daycare, I noticed it looked just as run down and abandoned as when I first stepped foot inside the place. No trace remained of the vibrant and lively daycare of 2001. The cobwebs, the moldy walls, the broken toys, and decaying kiddie attractions. They were all back. I jumped back as I felt my smartphone vibrating inside my pocket. It had been inactive ever since I was sent back to 2001, but it seemed it was working again. "Hi, Cindy. I've just finished my shift and I'm on my way to pick you up at the daycare. How was your first day, dear?" My mother said through the phone as I broke into tears.